Does the thought of making small talk leave you physically exhausted? You check your phone just to escape another conversation about the weather. You stand near the snack table hoping nobody starts another 5-minute conversation that means nothing. You're not antisocial, you're not rude. Your brain is just running a different operating system, one that treats meaningless chatter as a drain on its battery, not a way to charge it. But stay with this one, because this isn't really about small talk. It's about a habit that might already be costing you the people who'd actually want to know you. And by the end, you'll have to answer an uncomfortable question about yourself. Are you protecting your energy, or are you protecting yourself from being known? Here's what everyone gets wrong. Avoiding small talk doesn't automatically mean someone is shy, cold, or socially incompetent. Daniel, a 29-year-old software engineer, dreads every office happy hour, not because he dislikes people, but because "how's the weather? How was your weekend?" feels like cognitive sandpaper. He'd rather sit in silence for an hour than perform 10 minutes of small talk. That's not always a social deficit. For many people, it's simply a different wiring for what counts as a meaningful exchange. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. That same wiring that protects you from fake conversations can also quietly start protecting you from real ones. To be fair, not everyone who avoids small talk is doing it for the same reason. Sometimes it's social anxiety, sometimes it's depression, burnout, or being on the autism spectrum where small talk can feel genuinely overwhelming rather than just unrewarding. This video is about one specific pattern: people who avoid small talk by preference because they're filtering for deeper connection. If that's not your experience, that's okay too. Here's a number that surprises most people. In a study where strangers were randomly assigned to either small talk or deep personal conversation for the same amount of time, the deep talk group reported feeling significantly more connected and didn't find it any more awkward than the small talk group expected it to be. We predict deep conversation will feel uncomfortable. The data says we're usually wrong. Matthias Mell studied this same pattern outside the lab and found that people who had more substantive conversations day to day also tended to report higher life satisfaction, regardless of whether they were introverted or extroverted. Worth being clear, this shows correlation, not proof that deep talk causes happiness, but the pattern keeps showing up. Here's a thought worth sitting with. Small talk isn't always meaningless. Sometimes it really is warmth. But for a lot of people, it's quietly become something else, a script they perform so no one asks for more. Small talk asks more of your brain than people realize. You're managing what to say, reading someone's face for cues, hiding your real reaction, and performing enthusiasm you might not feel, all at once. Silence does the opposite. It lets your mind switch into its own internal mode, the same state your brain uses for daydreaming, sorting memories, and solving problems in the background. So here's the twist. The quiet person at the party probably isn't checked out. Their brain may simply be processing the situation differently, not necessarily doing less, just doing something else.
Picture Maya at a rooftop networking event. String lights, clinking glasses, 40 conversations happening at once. She's holding a drink she hasn't touched in 20 minutes, half smiling at a group near the bar. From the outside, she looks bored, but her eyes keep moving, to the guy laughing a half-second too hard at his own joke, or the couple standing just a bit too far apart. As a therapist, reading a room is muscle memory for her. She's just never clocked that she does it at parties, too. Not everyone who goes quiet is running this exact calculation, but for Maya, the silence has a job to do. Now picture Marcus, age 9, sitting silently at his grandmother's dinner table in Lahore while 3 generations argue, laugh, and eat around him, and nobody asks him to perform conversation because his silence is read as respect, not absence. 15 years later, in a New York open-plan office, that same silence gets him labeled hard to read. Same kid, same silence. 2 completely different verdicts because the room changed, not him. Right now, you probably think you're protecting your energy. That's the comfortable explanation. But sit with a harder one for a second. What if part of you is also protecting yourself from being known? Small talk is low risk. Nobody really sees you in it. Deep talk has a cost. It asks you to be visible. And if avoiding small talk has quietly turned into avoiding all talk that asks something real of you, that's not energy management anymore. That's a much more practiced kind of hiding. Silence is a wall you can hide behind, but it's also a window, and you don't get to choose which one other people see. Be honest with yourself for a second. When you fake interest in a conversation just to avoid seeming rude, how do you feel afterward? Drained? Resentful? A little hollow? That's not because you're a bad person. That's your brain telling you the transaction cost more than it gave back. 2 questions for the comments. First, what's the most exhausting small talk question you've ever been asked? Second, be honest. Is small talk a social skill or a social performance? Fight it out below. In many Western professional settings, small talk is treated almost like a moral obligation, the price of entry to being seen as friendly. But in cultures with stronger high-context communication norms, comfortable silence is often read as respect or trust, not coldness. Marcus didn't change. The rulebook around him did. So ask yourself honestly, would you rather spend an hour in silence with someone you trust or an hour making small talk with strangers? Your answer says more about you than you think. If you've ever left a party early, gone quiet in a group chat, or dreaded just checking in texts, that's not automatically a flaw to fix. For a lot of people, it's a nervous system asking for higher quality input, not less input altogether. The honest version of self-protection isn't avoiding people, it's being selective about who gets the real version of you. But here's the real question. If you've trained yourself to avoid small talk and avoid deep talk, what's actually left? Next time, we expose the hidden psychology of people who isolate themselves from both and why it's a much harder problem to fix.